Hello Yu-Gi-Oh players and welcome to Playing Chain Beat. I'm your host the RJB0. So today I want to talk about the evolution of Chain Beat over this format. And it's pretty universally recognized that this format sucked for Chain Beat. I mean, it's the best format the TCG has had for them because, it was just legal in the TCG, this format. But as far as formats that Chain Beat could exist in, this one sucks pretty badly because Chain Beat actually came into existence in the OCG during the perfect format for it. It was made in order to counteract Evil Swarms, which it does very, very effectively. But it came into existence in the TCG in a format that is almost entirely aggro. And before you guys say anything, Prophecy or Spellbooks focuses on putting two very large monsters on the board and using spot removal to get rid of any problematic cards for those specific monsters. So if that's not aggro, I don't know what is. And as you guys have seen in my meta triangle that I've showed you guys before, Stun, like Chain Beat, like the classic legacy build for Chain Beat, is terrible against an aggro format. So you've seen this kind of build that I'm showing you right here with the legacy draw engine that goes for the accumulated fortunes to get those extra draw powers and the Seal of Orichalcos to power up your monsters, etc. That just doesn't work anymore because that relies on using one card at a time to hit key strategies in an opponent's plays. And against dragons, for instance, you just can't do that. Even if you hit one of their key strategies, they're just going to come back with another one. They just have resources that huge. So this classic stun, one for one, hit their most important card strategy just isn't working. And a lot of stun players, a lot of floater beat players have been discovering that. And so, with the introduction of Chain Beat into the TCG, we've seen the evolution from this legacy build, which in and of itself, in a slower format, is extremely powerful. It generates tons of advantage, it's very difficult to get around, and it's very good against decks like Evil Swarms that rely on a slower strategy, a more grind game based deal, and it may also be effective next format, but I'll get to that. So we've evolved from this version of the deck into one that incorporates a new card, and that's Black Garden. Now, in the OCG, we did see a couple of Black Garden builds of Chain Beat. By the way, this is my current Chain Beat build, in case you guys were wondering, before E-Dragons came out. But when Chain Beat came into the TCG, players realized that we couldn't survive the format without a card that limited our opponent's strategies and made sure that even if they did put monsters on the board, that we could get rid of them easily. So Chain Beat steadily evolved from just being a hard stun deck into gaining a little bit of a control aspect with Black Garden. This was very important. It helped us against the Mermail matchup. It even still helped us against the Evil Swarm matchup, and it was beginning to help us against dragons. But we realized that that just wasn't quite enough, and so rose the new deck that isn't quite a Chain Beat deck. It isn't just a Chain Beat deck. The new deck that we're seeing all over the place in the new Chain Beat meta, Garden Beat. Garden Beat is a departure from the classic Chain Beat style, where it doesn't focus around the chain ability of your monsters and the ability to create floater strategies so much as the lockdown power that comes with having Black Garden on an effective monster. Having a Black Garden sitting on top of a Kaiku or a Ryo or a bear is extremely powerful this format and is the basis for this deck's success. Whereas in a classic Chain Garden build, which is the old Chain Beat Black Garden build, you did still have to rely a lot on those one-for-one card strategies through things like Compulsory Evacuation Device and Compulsory Escape Device. And while those are still good, and that combination with Black Garden was really important, they needed that extra little boost from the monster cards. And it's the shift to using the power of monster cards that has made this deck so successful, this format. Why? Well, because it allows you to lock down opponent strategies without relying on some less reliable trap cards. Most of the time, when you are trying to lock down a deck via trap cards, in this format, you're going to be relying on something like Vanity's Emptiness, which requires you to maintain a field that just isn't realistic in a chain beat deck like this. While Vanity's Emptiness can be very useful, especially in a macro build with chain beat, it just doesn't help you when there are so many ways that your opponent can take down your cards. So what we're seeing is the rise of uses of things like Kaiku, which is very effective against both spellbooks and against dragons. It's using the power of monsters with powerful lockdown and floater strategies, like including Grand Mole and Bear, to supplement the power of our trap cards. And that's crucial this meta. A standard chain beat build just wouldn't work correctly. That's why Garden Beat is so successful. And if you're wondering why I'm bringing Garden Beat up now that the format is almost coming to an end, is because you guys have been seeing Garden Beat come out. You guys have been playing Garden Beat, you've been playing with different builds of it, and you've seen me workshopping Garden Beat decks. But the real question now is, will Garden Beat survive through the next format? Well, we have seen some evidence of what the next format is going to look like, where Evil Swarms have not gotten touched, Infernities have not gotten touched. We've seen Mermails had very little done to them. They hit Teus and Abyssphere, which, yes, slows down the deck, but it basically brings them back to a faster version of their Undyne build, which is definitely still an extremely powerful deck. So that's definitely still relevant. We even see dragons being relevant even after the babies have gone. So yes, those monster lockdown powers that were very useful in this deck, especially, or in this format, especially Kaiku, will still be powerful. However, there is one hang-up that I see with Garden Beat. Well, there are actually two. The first is consistency. One of the things that Chain Beat traded out in favor of power for this format is consistency. A Garden Beat build has much less consistency than the old Chain Beat build did, than the old Chain Garden Beat build did. Instead of being almost guaranteed a hand with maybe 4 traps and a monster, or 4 traps and or 4 traps, a monster, a black garden, or some combination of largely traps and maybe a monster or a couple of spells, we are seeing it be much more likely for you to draw into a hand of monsters. And that's actually a major problem for Chain Beat. While it worked for this format, while it was so important to have power in this format, this extremely fast and this extremely powerful format, consistency is going to be crucial going into a slower format. The more consistent deck will almost always win the game. And the lack of consistency in a Garden Beat build may hold the deck back. The second problem I see is the lack of compatibility with Macrocosmos. Macrocosmos is going to become, once again, the most important anti-meta card of the format. If Mermails come back into power, if Infernities come back into power, once Boojins are in play, once Fire Fist are back in power against Fire Kings, all of these decks are hurt by Macro. So once again, Macro will become the most important card of the format, which means that a couple of cards will no longer be effective when used in a Chain Beat deck. Kaiku may not be necessary if you have Macro. It's still usable though. Bear, however, will not be as useful a card. Yes, you can use it to search out tankies, which will be down 1 on. But in all reality, once you have that, you can't do as much with Bear as you're going to want to. You might as well be running that third duality that we're going to get. Then Ryo. Ryo is also less useful under Macrocosmos. It's not unuseful. It does still have that powerful effect to keep players from searching their decks. But under Macrocosmos, it doesn't quite have that same potency that it used to. So the biggest problems with a Garden Beat build going into this next format are the lack of consistency and the lack of compatibility with Macrocosmos. Now, there are a couple things that you can get around that with. The first thing is use of Dimensional Fissure instead of Macrocosmos. D-Fissure works with Bear and is still effective with Kaiku, since I had no idea why I was talking about Kaiku. Anyway, you can still use Bear under Dimensional Fissure. So D-Fissure can be used to get around the Bear problem. But in all reality, would you rather have a D-Fissure or would you rather have a Macrocosmos? Another problem we're going to see is if Boojins come back into, or really come into power, Black Garden will not be as effective a card anymore. Don't get me wrong, against the vast majority of the meta, Black Garden will be very powerful, but it's almost turning into a side deck card more than a main deck card. Against Boojins, this card is almost detrimental to your strategy, because they are going to be able to use it to their advantage. They aren't affected by it because of the Crane, because the Crane resets their attack when they use it, which means that their monsters are going to be more powerful than your Rabbit and your Thunderbird, and once they have that, they have the game over you. And that's a major problem. So it's entirely possible that even Chain Garden builds, like the one I have here, will not be quite as viable this format. We may see a return to our classic Legacy Beat build, or Orichalcos Beat build. Things like this will have the draw power, will have the consistency, will have compatibility with macro, and as well will also have that stun power. Yes, Black Garden will still be very good, but it won't be as effective against Boojins, and there are still so many strategies that are going to be able to overcome it, especially with people incorporating MST back into their decks. With the rise of Fire Fist and Fire Kings, MST is going to be an extremely important card to the format, which means that Black Garden is going to be less of a smart investment than it was before. In a Legacy build, you can worry less about MST, you can worry less about Heavy, because there's so much more chainable stuff, and you can go get those 1-for-1s and bait out their MST off of a Legacy or off of a Jar of Greed, rather than allowing your opponent to take out a key card like Black Garden that you were relying on. So I actually foresee, in the coming format, while Garden Beat was an extremely powerful deck that came out of this format, a very good anti-meta deck that could definitely survive the E-Dragons and Prophecy builds, it will not be as effective as it was before, and we may see a return to the use of the old Legacy build with Macrocosmos, with Cards instead of Tankies, and with that Orichalcos right there. So what do you guys think? I hope you guys liked the video. If you did, hit that thumbs up button. If you didn't, let me know why. And of course, like I just said, let me know what you guys think in the comments below, discuss, and then hit that subscribe button for more Chain Beat videos. This is the RJB0. Thank you guys for watching Yu-Gi-Oh! And Business Casual. I got a jet, guys. See ya.